When the phone rang that morning, I almost didn't answer. I had just come home from another grueling week on the road. My job in pharmaceutical sales took me everywhere, and exhaustion clung to me like a second skin. My apartment in Chicago was quiet, still draped in shadows, the suitcase half unpacked in the corner. I glanced at the caller ID and felt my stomach tighten. Janet, my stepmother. Her name flashing across my screen always brought a surge of unease. Ever since she had married my father years after my mother's death, she had moved through my life like a shadow, draining warmth and twisting words until they left scars. I pressed the phone to my ear, slowly bracing myself. "Gabriella," she said, her voice dripping with a false sweetness that I had come to recognize as her signature. "I thought you should know I gave your trust fund money to Tiffany. She deserves it more than you. She's better than you." The words slammed into me like a physical blow. My hand went cold, my knees weakened, and I sank into the kitchen chair. What I whispered, my voice trembling. She gave a little laugh, light and sharp. "You've had enough, Gabriella. Your life is fine. Tiffany, though, she needs it. She's got dreams, potential. Unlike you, she won't waste it. You travel, you make money already. Your mother's trust fund, well, I thought it would be better in Tiffany's hands." Her casual cruelty made my vision blur with rage. My mother had died when I was only 12, and that trust fund had been her last gift to me. She had saved, planned, and placed it in a secure account with instructions that it was mine when I turned 21. It wasn't meant to be touched by anyone else. It wasn't meant for Janet. It certainly wasn't meant for Tiffany, my stepsister, who had drifted into my life like a storm cloud, demanding, spoiled, entitled. I struggled to form words, my throat tight. That money was mine. My mother left it for me. Janet sighed, the sound heavy with annoyance. "Oh, Gabriella, always so dramatic. You think money is everything. Tiffany is family now. She's my daughter, and frankly, she's more like a real daughter to me than you've ever been. Don't call your father about this. He doesn't need to be bothered." The line clicked dead before I could respond. For a long time, I sat frozen in that chair, the silence of my apartment pressing against me. My mother's face filled my mind, her warm eyes, her gentle hands smoothing my hair when I was a child. "This is for you, Gabriella," she had once said, holding me close. "For your future. Promise me you'll use it to build the life you deserve." And now Janet was telling me it was gone, just like that. I pressed my shaking hands to my face and let the tears come. Rage, grief, disbelief, they tangled inside me until I could barely breathe. But beneath the storm of emotions, another voice rose, quiet but steady. "Check. Verify. Don't take her word as truth." Janet thrived on manipulation. She wanted me broken, panicked, powerless. I couldn't give her that satisfaction. I pulled out the folder I kept locked in my desk drawer, the one my mother's lawyer had given me years ago when the trust fund transferred into my name. Inside were copies of documents, bank statements, and the contact information for Mr. Wallace, the attorney who had overseen everything. With trembling hands, I dialed his number. "Gabriella," he answered warmly after I introduced myself. "It's been a while. What's going on?" "My stepmother called me," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "She said she gave my trust fund to Tiffany, that it's gone." There was a pause, then a soft chuckle. "That would be impossible. Your mother was very clear she wanted the trust protected. No one can access it without your consent. Janet doesn't have the legal authority." Relief crashed over me in a wave so strong it made me dizzy. "So, the money's safe?" "Yes," he assured me. "I have all the documentation. You're the sole beneficiary. If Janet or Tiffany tried to touch it, it would be fraud. And if they did somehow move funds, the trail would be clear. We can take action immediately." I exhaled shakily, pressing my hand to my chest. Janet had lied. Lied to hurt me, lied to rattle me, lied to make me doubt myself. But why? Why call me out of the blue just to say that? Unless she had tried and failed. Unless she had discovered the walls my mother had built around the trust and was furious she couldn't breach them. I thanked Mr. Wallace, promised to come by his office soon, and hung up. My hands still trembled, but not from fear anymore, from fury. I could see Janet in my mind, smug and certain that her words had gutted me. She thought I would crumble, that I would lash out or beg or cave in. She wanted me to spiral, but all she had done was ignite something deeper. I pulled my suitcase fully open, the clothes spilling out, the tiredness of travel still clinging to me. But I wasn't exhausted anymore. I was burning. My whole body buzzed with adrenaline, the kind that comes when you realize someone has underestimated you one too many times. I thought of Tiffany, her designer clothes, her careless spending, her mocking laughter when she called me boring for working so much. She had once sneered, "Money is meant to be spent, not hoarded like you do," and now Janet was feeding her that trust fund fantasy, telling her she was better than me. No, not this time. For years, I had played the quiet daughter, the one who nodded, who kept her distance, who didn't stir conflict. But my mother had left me that trust not only to protect me, but to empower me, to remind me that I had a future no one else could take away, and I would protect it with everything in me. That night, I sat at my desk and began writing. Notes, memories, every word Janet had spoken to me. I pulled out every document, every email I had ever received about the trust. I created a file so detailed it could stand in a courtroom if needed. Because I knew this wasn't over. Janet's call wasn't the end, it was the opening shot. And I wasn't going to lose. The next weekend, I drove out to my father's house in the suburbs. The streets of Oak Park were lined with trees now bursting into spring leaves, but all I could feel was a chill in my bones. My father's home had never felt like mine after Janet moved in. She changed everything, the curtains, the furniture, even the smell. The warmth my mother had built into every corner of the house had been erased, replaced by Janet's sterile taste and Tiffany's chaos. As I parked in the driveway, I spotted Tiffany's car, red flashy, a brand new model she could never have afforded on her own. My fists tightened on the steering wheel. I walked inside without knocking, the scent of Janet's perfume immediately suffocating. She appeared from the kitchen, her lips curling into a smug smile. "Gabriella, what a surprise. We weren't expecting company." "Where's Dad?" I asked flatly. "In his study," she replied, her tone syrupy sweet. "But really, you didn't need to come all this way. I told you on the phone things are already settled." "Nothing is settled," I said coldly, brushing past her. In the study, my father looked up from his desk. His hair had gone grayer, his shoulders stooped more than I remembered, but his eyes softened when he saw me. "Gabby," he said warmly, standing to hug me. I let him, inhaling the faint scent of the pipe tobacco he still kept, though he rarely smoked. For a moment, I was a little girl again, safe in his arms. Then Janet's voice slithered in from the doorway. "She's upset because of the trust fund," Janet said, her tone mock sympathetic. I explained to her that Tiffany needed it more. "She doesn't understand." My father frowned, confusion crossing his features. "Janet, that money is Gabriella's. Her mother left it for her." "She doesn't need it," Janet pressed. "Look at her, she's successful, she travels constantly, she earns plenty. Tiffany, on the other hand, has ambitions. She wants to start her own business. Shouldn't we support that?" I stepped forward, fury thrumming through my veins. "That's not your decision to make, it's mine, and you have no legal right to touch that money." My father rubbed his forehead, clearly overwhelmed. "I don't want fighting," he murmured. "That's the problem," I said, my voice breaking. "You never want fighting. You let her steamroll me. You let Tiffany treat me like I'm nothing. And now you're letting them rewrite what Mom wanted for me." Janet's eyes narrowed. "Oh, Gabriella, always playing the victim. Maybe your mother thought you'd be more responsible by now, but look at you still clinging to money instead of family." Family. I snapped the word like acid on my tongue. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't erase a daughter's legacy to give it to someone else. Tiffany breezed in at that moment, dressed in designer clothes, her hair freshly done. "Are we still talking about that stupid fund?" she asked, rolling her eyes. "Janet already said it's mine now. You're acting pathetic, Gabriella." I turned to her, my voice trembling but sharp. "That stupid fund was my mother's last gift to me. You don't get to laugh about it." Her smile was cruel. "Then maybe you should have been better like me. Mom says you're bitter that you don't know how to enjoy life. Maybe she's right." My father slammed his hand on the desk, startling us all. "Enough!" His voice boomed, shaking with anger I hadn't heard in years. "This is between Gabriella and her mother's trust. Janet, you had no right to interfere. Tiffany, show some respect." But even as he said it, his eyes wavered, darting toward Janet with hesitation. The grip she had on him was strong. I knew she would twist his words later, make herself the victim, poison him against me in subtle ways. I clenched my fists. "I'm not here to argue. I just came to tell you both I've spoken with Mr. Wallace. The money is safe, you can't touch it. If either of you try again, it will be fraud." Janet's mask slipped, then her face tightening with fury. For the first time, she looked less sure of herself. Tiffany scoffed, but there was unease in her eyes too. I turned to my father, my throat aching. Dad, I need you to hear this. Mom trusted you to protect me after she was gone. But every time you let Janet belittle me, every time you stayed silent, you failed that promise. I'm done waiting for you to choose me. I'll protect myself. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, I walked out, ignoring Janet's hissed, ungrateful girl, and Tiffany's mocking laughter. Back in my car, I let the tears fall. Confronting them had been harder than I imagined. But beneath the pain was a spark of strength. I had faced them, and I had not broken. That week, I met with Mr. Wallace again. He helped me set up tighter protections around the trust legal safeguards that would make it nearly impossible for anyone to challenge. He even suggested drawing up a restraining order if Janet continued to harass me. You're not powerless, he reminded me gently. Your mother made sure of that. His words became my anchor. But Janet was not finished. She began calling my phone daily, leaving voicemails laced with venom. Tiffany posted photos online of expensive shopping trips captioned with taunts like, "Thanks to family support, dreams come true." They wanted me to snap to lash out to make myself look unstable. Instead, I documented everything. Screenshots, recordings, transcripts. Every word they threw at me, I turned into evidence. One night, exhausted from work and from the endless harassment, I sat in bed with the cedar box my mother had left me. Inside were photos, her letters, keepsakes. I held a picture of her in my hands, her smile radiant, her arm around me as a little girl. I won't let them take you from me, I whispered. Not your memory, not your love, not what you left for me. For the first time since Janet's call, I felt calm. Not because the storm was over, but because I finally believed I could weather it. And deep down, I knew Janet and Tiffany's schemes had only just begun. If I had thought Janet and Tiffany would retreat after my confrontation, I was wrong. Their attacks only grew more insidious, winding their way through every corner of my life. It started with whispers in the extended family. My aunt called one evening, her tone cautious. "Gabby, Janet says you've become obsessed with money, that you're threatening legal action against your own father. Is it true?" The words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. Janet was poisoning the well, painting me as greedy, unstable, ungrateful. She's twisting everything I told my aunt, my voice breaking. I'm not after money, I'm protecting what my mother left for me. But I could hear the doubt in her silence. That was Janet's skill. She didn't need to win outright. She just needed to plant seeds of suspicion until even people who loved me began to question. Then Tiffany joined in, flaunting her supposed inheritance everywhere. She posted photos online of new designer bags, new jewelry, dinners in restaurants that cost more than my week's groceries. Her captions were daggers wrapped in glitter. "When your family finally recognizes your worth." Another read, "Some of us are chosen, some of us are forgotten." Each post gathered likes and comments, her friends cheering her on. To anyone outside, it looked as though she really had inherited something huge. And when mutual acquaintances saw me, they gave me pitying looks as if I were the bitter stepsister who had lost. The anger churned in me like a storm, but I refused to let it drive me into reckless action. I kept documenting, screenshotting every post, saving every voicemail Janet left with her venom. "You'll never win, Gabriella. Your mother isn't here to protect you anymore. Tiffany is the daughter I always wanted. You're nothing." Her words stung, but they also revealed her cruelty in sharp relief. Each recording was another piece of truth I could use when the time came. Meanwhile, my father drifted further away. He answered my calls less, his voice weary when he did pick up. Once I drove to see him unannounced. He looked startled, almost guilty, when he opened the door. Janet appeared behind him, her hand possessively on his shoulder. "Your father doesn't need this stress," she said coldly. "Stop dragging him into your tantrums. He deserves peace." "Peace," I demanded, my voice trembling. "By letting you rewrite everything Mom wanted. By letting you and Tiffany bully me until I disappear." Dad's eyes were pained, but he said nothing. He just stood there silent, as if he had no power. In that moment, I realized he had chosen, and he hadn't chosen me. I drove home with tears blurring the road. Grief pressed on me heavier than anger. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about the love I had lost, the family I no longer had. But that grief hardened into resolve. If they wanted me erased, they would fail. I doubled down at work, channeling my rage into long hours and determined focus. I earned recognition, closed deals, built relationships that strengthened my career. At night, I poured energy into preparing with Mr. Wallace, building a case so airtight Janet couldn't poke holes through it. One evening, Mr. Wallace leaned across his desk, his eyes kind but firm. "Gabriella, you need to understand something. Janet thrives on control. She wants you to feel helpless so you'll give up. But your mother foresaw this. She built protections for you. You have the power here, even if it doesn't feel like it." I nodded through the weight still pressed on me. It just feels like I'm fighting ghosts. My mother's ghost. The ghost of the family I used to have. And they twist everything so I start to question myself. "That's how abusers operate," he said softly. "They want you to doubt your own reality. That's why you write everything down. That's why you gather evidence. That's why you remember who you are." His words steadied me. But Janet wasn't finished. She escalated, trying to worm her way into legal channels. One morning I received notice that she had attempted to file documents claiming Tiffany as a co-beneficiary of the trust. It was absurd, easily disproven, but the fact that she tried made my blood boil. I called her immediately. "How dare you forge documents? You know that's fraud." She laughed, her voice smug. "Oh, Gabriella, who's going to believe you? Everyone knows you're unstable. I'm just trying to do what's best for this family." I slammed the phone down, shaking. But instead of collapsing, I felt something new rise inside me. A fire that was no longer just defensive, it was ready to fight. That weekend, I drove to the cemetery where my mother was buried. The sky was gray, the air sharp with approaching rain. I knelt at her grave, my hands pressed to the cool stone. "Mom," I whispered, my voice cracking. "They're trying to erase me. They're trying to take what you left. And Dad, he doesn't stand up for me. I feel so alone. But I promise you, I won't let them win. I'll protect what you gave me. I'll protect myself." Tears fell freely, soaking the earth. Yet with each one I felt lighter, as if my grief was watering the soil, planting strength inside me. When I rose, I wasn't trembling anymore, I was steady. That night, I began drafting something new. Not just a case file, not just evidence. A letter to my father. I poured out everything I had held inside: the pain of being ignored, the cruelty of Janet's words, the betrayal of his silence. I told him that I loved him, but I couldn't keep living in the shadow of his inaction. I didn't know if he would ever read it, but writing it freed me. By the end of that week, I had everything ready: documents, recordings, screenshots, even Janet's fraudulent filing attempt. Mr. Wallace assured me it was more than enough to crush any legal challenge. But still, a part of me knew Janet wouldn't stop until she was forced to. And that confrontation was coming soon. Because people like Janet didn't accept defeat quietly. They fought until their lies strangled them. And I was ready to be the one to hold up the truth. The confrontation I had been bracing for finally arrived in the form of a court summons. Janet had done exactly what Mr. Wallace warned she might: filed a petition contesting the trust. She wanted Tiffany legally recognized as a co-beneficiary, twisting her lies into official paperwork. The day of the hearing, I stood outside the courthouse with the cedar box in my hands. It wasn't necessary for evidence, but I brought it anyway. My mother's keepsakes were my armor, her memory, a silent witness by my side. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with restrained energy. Janet strutted in, wearing a perfectly tailored suit, Tiffany trailing behind in designer heels. They looked smug, as though they had already won. My father walked with them, his expression strained, caught between his wife's confidence and his daughter's silence. My chest tightened, but I reminded myself this wasn't about winning his love. This was about defending my mother's. Janet's lawyer started first painting me as greedy, unstable, a workaholic with no family values. He claimed Tiffany was closer to Janet, more deserving of the funds, because she would use them wisely to start her own business. At one point, he even dared to suggest my mother had intended for the money to be shared, but simply forgot to make the change before her death. The lies crawled over me like insects, but I kept my face calm. Mr. Wallace leaned forward, whispering, "Patience. Our turn will come." And then it did. He laid out the trust documents, each page notarized, each line clear. He presented statements from doctors who had confirmed my mother's mental clarity in her final months. He even pulled out emails she had written to him, reminding him to safeguard everything for Gabriella and Gabriella alone. The judge's eyes scanned each page carefully, her expression unreadable. Finally, it was my turn. I rose, the weight of the courtroom pressing down on me. My voice trembled at first, but I steadied it. My mother died when I was 12. Before she passed, she told me she wanted to make sure I was protected no matter what happened. That trust fund wasn't about wealth. It was her last gift. Her way of saying she still believed in my future. I glanced at Janet, then her lips pressed thin, her eyes cold. Janet has tried to rewrite that. She has tried to erase my mother's intentions, to make me feel small, to convince me I don't deserve what was left for me. But the documents are clear. The truth is clear. And all I want is to honor what my mother asked. For a long moment, silence filled the courtroom. I could hear my own breath, steady but sharp. The judge finally leaned forward. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said to Janet, her tone stern, "this trust is airtight. There is no legal standing for your petition. Filing fraudulent documents is a serious offense. I strongly advise you to withdraw immediately." Janet's face flushed crimson. Tiffany shifted nervously in her seat. My father stared at the floor, shame etched into the lines of his face. Mr. Wallace closed his folder with a decisive snap. "Your Honor, we request dismissal." And with the strike of the gavel, it was over. The petition was thrown out. The trust remained mine. Relief washed over me so intensely I nearly collapsed. But beneath the relief was sorrow too, a hollow ache that no legal victory could erase. As I left the courtroom, Janet hissed at me under her breath, "You think this is over? You'll regret humiliating me." I stopped, turning to face her squarely. For once, my voice did not tremble. "I don't need to humiliate you, Janet. You've done that yourself. Every lie you told, every cruel word, you've exposed who you really are, and people are finally starting to see it." Her eyes blazed with fury, but she said nothing more. Tiffany clung to her arm, her face pale with the first cracks of doubt. My father lingered behind them, his gaze flicking toward me as if he wanted to speak. But no words came. He followed Janet out just as he always had. That evening, I drove straight to the cemetery. I knelt by my mother's grave, the cedar box beside me, and whispered, "It's done, Mom. I kept your promise safe. They couldn't take it from me." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of lilacs from a nearby bush. For the first time in months, I felt peace settle into my chest. Still, part of me grieved. Grieved that my father had stood on the wrong side of the courtroom. Grieved that Janet's poison had seeped so deep into the family. Grieved that Tiffany, who could have been my sister in truth, had chosen cruelty instead. But grief was not defeat. It was a scar. And scars meant survival. That night, as I sat by the lake near my apartment, I realized something profound. The trust fund wasn't just money. It was a metaphor for my mother's love, safeguarded against anyone who tried to diminish me. Janet had tried to strip me of worth. Tiffany had tried to steal my place. But in fighting back, I had discovered something stronger than inheritance. I had discovered my own voice, and I wasn't going to let anyone silence it again. The morning after the hearing, I woke up feeling like the air itself was lighter. For months I had been carrying the weight of Janet's venom, Tiffany's mockery, and my father's silence. But the gavel had come down, and for the first time since my mother's death, I felt that her voice had been honored. I brewed coffee and stood by the window of my apartment, staring at the city below. Cars hummed. People hurried to work. Life moved on as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But inside me, something monumental had shifted. My phone buzzed on the counter. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. Another call from Janet, another bitter message. But when I looked, it was my father. I hesitated before answering. His voice was softer than I'd expected. "Gabby," he said, almost a whisper. "Can I see you?" Every instinct in me wanted to refuse. But another part, a wounded child still craving her father's presence, said yes. We met later that afternoon at a quiet cafe near the river. He looked older than I remembered, his eyes weary, his posture slumped. When he saw me, he smiled faintly, though guilt shadowed his face. "I'm sorry," he began. The words cracked something inside me. For years I had waited to hear them, yet now they didn't bring relief. They brought questions. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why did you let her treat me that way?" Why did you stand by while she tried to erase Mom's memory, erase me? His hands shook as he wrapped them around his coffee cup. I thought keeping the peace was better than fighting. After your mother died, I was broken. Janet came into my life when I was vulnerable and I let her take control. I didn't protect you the way I should have. Tears blurred my vision. You didn't just fail to protect me. You chose her over me. Again and again. He nodded, shame etched into his face. I know. And I can't undo it. But I want you to know I saw what you did yesterday. You were strong, braver than I ever was. Your mother would be proud. The words lodged in my chest, bittersweet. A part of me wanted to forgive him fully, to cling to the scraps of love I still felt. But another part knew forgiveness couldn't erase the scars. I don't know if we can ever go back, I said softly. But I hope you mean what you said. Because I can't keep carrying both your silence and Janet's cruelty. He reached across the table, but I pulled my hand back. It wasn't anger, it was self-preservation. We parted with an uneasy truce. He had spoken his apology, but it would take more than words to mend years of damage. That evening, I went to the lakefront. The sun was setting, casting the water in shades of fire and gold. I carried the cedar box with me, setting it gently on the bench beside me. Inside were my mother's letters. I opened one at random. Her handwriting, elegant and steady, filled the page. Gabriella, remember that strength isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet persistence, the choice to keep going, even when no one believes in you. That is your gift. I pressed the paper to my chest, tears falling freely. My mother had known. She had seen me even when the world hadn't. She had left me not just money, but a map to my own resilience. In that moment, I realized something. The victory wasn't just about keeping the trust fund safe. It was about reclaiming myself from Janet's lies. It was about telling Tiffany she could not define me. It was about telling my father his silence would no longer chain me. The scars would always remain, nights of doubt, years of feeling second best, but they no longer defined me. What defined me was the woman who had walked into that courtroom with her head high, the woman who had chosen truth over fear. As the sky darkened, I whispered into the wind, "I'm free now, Mom. I'm finally free." And in the hush of the evening, with the waves lapping against the shore, I felt her presence, warm, steady, proud.